Good morning, folks. I am seeing if... Are the things turned on? Yes, the things are turned on. Excellent. Good, good. I'm also trying something which may or may not be apparent. Let me see if it's working here. Because certain bits of it... Yes, it appears to be working. Okay. That is tiny! Let's do something about that. Tiny, tiny fonts. Let me see if there's a way to fix that so that it does not... And it vanishes after a few seconds. That's weird. Oh, it had messages after... Okay, let's try always show messages first of all. And we're going to up the font size to about... Yeah, probably was supposed to go smaller with this whole thing. But we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out as we go. Okay. Let's try this. Testing. That's a tiny bit better. Actually, you know what? No, it's not. It's the same. That's because I have to save the settings first. And then it'll perhaps work. Okay, that's a little bit better. We might want to shade that box just a little bit, if that's possible. Let me see. Yes, this is, as you can see, possibly, as you might be able to see right now, there is a thing now showing the Twitch chat on the screen itself. The hope being that there will be we'll be able to make the thing work, so that folks will actually see it as it's coming up on the screen. So yeah, it could be clearer from what I'm seeing here, but we're figuring these things out still. Yeah, I don't think there's a way to, I don't think there's a way to do any sort of shading behind it, unless I like throw in a separate thing. But that at least will give people an idea of things that are currently going on in that, and we'll just wander around from there. Okay. Good, excellent. How's everyone doing? I hope you are all well. It is Wednesday, April 1st, year 2020. What has been happening? Yesterday I got to participate last night. So there's these strange, curious cubes. You can't see that. There's these strange, curious cubes that are down here. For some reason, they've appeared in front of me. This was from last night, where we were doing a thing. I was guesting over on Penny for a Tale, that channel, with Spence, whom I haven't seen in a little while, and Dave Robinson and Paul Cooley, folks who I've not seen for quite a while, just at conventions and what have you. It's been a little time. And it's mostly folks from the... It was interesting because so the folks that I got to play RPGs with last night, I've played RPGs with one of them a little bit, but it's mostly that I know them mostly from the podcasting world, podcasting writers, Podio books. No, that's its own site. Podcast novels and what have you, and other things adjacent to that. I actually I participated in the podcast novel of one of them, Spence, and it's been a little while. It's been a little while. This was all stuff that started in the late aughts. Ah, hey! Thank you for the sub. Much appreciated. Hi. Hello. Good morning. We were playing terribly attractive battle wizards last night, basically, and it was fun. It's a game by Grant Howitt, same person who wrote Honey Heist. So it's a one-page game, and it was fun. It was appropriately silly, and I had a good time with it. I decided to play off the trope of the person trying to be a serious wizard. So I was playing the straight man, basically, last night, which worked nicely because everyone else was just bonkers, so that worked out well. But it was a delight. It was neat actually getting to play with them, just because it's like I knew that they were kind of into RPGs, because I'd talked to them about RPGs before. And it's just more recently within the last couple of years that they've started getting into online gaming. It seems to me. So it's just, and I've played some online games with a little bit with a few other folks who I've not streamed with. Well, actually, I have now. Come to think of it, but it's. Yeah, there are some other folks from that sort of circle that within the last couple of years have started streaming, and I got to play with them a little bit on stream. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was an experience. There was it was just mostly dealing with stuff at a wizard's college, basically. Some of the elementals trying to destroy the library. That was pretty much the plot of what was happening. So I had a good time with it. It's a very simple system. You just basically roll a die, and 4, 5, or 6 is success. But it was amusing. I think that I'd welcome the opportunity to play more with them. I rarely ever get to play with a lot of these folks from that time. It was a very important time for me, the whole getting into podcasting thing, because it was the first time in quite a while that I that I felt like I was part of something that was supportive. And so that was a good thing. That was a very good thing. And I had been in such communities before, sort of. But there are varying levels of how these things work, and I'm actually going to get into a little bit of that after in a little bit. No, that game was cool. It was neat, actually getting to play a game with them, and it was just it was just like playing a game with folks who enjoy RP. That was basically the thing, but it was a lot of fun. And I want to see if I can have those folks back on the channel more, because it would be nice to have them on this channel more. But in any case, what do I have in front of me here? So the book today that I will be talking about, the books today that I will be talking about, are by Gene Wolfe, who is, I think, probably best known for the Book of the New Sun, the Book of the Long Sun, Book of the Short Sun, basically all of those Sun books, and I will probably talk about them at some point, but So he became pretty quickly one of my favorite authors. I'm gonna give the standard disclaimer. He is now deceased. He is he got he got into like his 80s at least, I think. I can't remember anymore. Before he passed away. Which means that when he started writing in that time before we all had the internet. And the time before we were even well connected enough to understand that different people experience things differently. And so that's a caveat, just a little caveat, that for anyone who wants to dive into Gene Wolfe stuff, there are a few things, tropes, what have you, that will show up in some of his work, in a good portion of his work, that about people and relationships between people and things like that, there was not nearly the amount of awareness about that there is today. I know, right? What? There was a time before the internet? What are you saying? And just once again, because to avoid pedantry here, I'm speaking of the World Wide Web more specifically than the internet. Because I don't have the timeline down exactly. Someone's going to pull out of their collective dark places of the mind. The internet actually started at a college in the 1960s. I know. I know this. I'm speaking of the thing that we, in our collective consciousness, think of as the internet, which is actually the World Wide Web. But anyway, enough of this falderall. Let's talk about a different kind of falderall. So, the series of books I'm actually going to talk about by Gene Wolfe are ones that actually these are the ones I sort of recommend folks start with. And these are later books. This is the, what some folks, I believe they call it the Wizard Knight series. But it starts with the Knight, and then it's the Wizard. It's 2 books. So we have the Knight, and then we have the Wizard. And dial-up modems and bulletin boards playing MUDs. You remember that? That's good. I remember that. I remember going on CompuServe and playing on their MUDs. And it was amazing. It was amazing, I tell you. You wait for 10 minutes, your phone line is entirely taken up while you do this, and you sit there and you type, and you try to pick up vegetables, and go and randomly fight people, and it's all text. You try to wander around talking to people, and they all act very strange. Because we were all sort of awkwardly trying to figure ourselves out. But in any case, I am going to tinker with the font here because I wanted to have a sort of a uniform looking thing, but it's probably better if folks can actually read what it is that's appearing on the screen. Oh, that's not good. That's not helpful at all. So if I go with that font, I shall need to reduce the size of the font. Let's try that. That's a little bit better. Okay. Possibly? We'll see. We'll see how this goes. This is a work in progress. It was very local community focused, though. We had ANSI after a while. Color! It was amazing. I'm seeing it's actually cutting off people's names, though, if I make it like that. So I'm going to go back to... we'll try different options. We'll see how they do. I have gone mad with power as I experiment with these things. See, I was trying to avoid this particular view because I don't particularly... There's things aesthetically about it that I'm not too fond of, but it probably is clearer. as we sit here experimenting. In any case, we'll figure it out. Could just do this. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to this. In any case, yeah, I think that I think it was a fun time when we had the yeah, that's better. When I got to do that, but and in any case, this these books are, I think, probably the most accessible of the stuff that Gene Wolfe has written. I actually need to read more of his stuff, because it's mostly for me been the various Sun books and these, but I do need to check out some of his other stuff just so that I can see if any of that is more accessible than this. Here's the thing. If you want to start reading Gene Wolfe and you just dive right into the Book of the New Sun, it is going to be difficult. And I say this because it was difficult for me, and I am presuming, and I have seen that rather a lot of folks also have said this, because he's using words that have not been used since the time of the Roman Empire. And before, he uses words that are not in the standard American dictionary that I had. That they were in the I had a condensed sort of Oxford thing, right? And some of the words were in it, but you had to get the unabridged dictionary. It's about this big. I think I still have it in the other room. I might show it to you sometime when I feel strong enough to carry it. But that's a doorstop of a book. There are some words that weren't even in there, and you'd actually have to go to the full Oxford English Dictionary to find. Words like Smilodon and Praetorian and things of that nature. It's a lot of these words you would think they're made up, but they're not. They're just, very obscure. And he did that as a way of getting across quite a lot about the world, which worked nicely. However, it's difficult. These books are not written that way. He wrote these later. He wrote these. I'm gonna look at the thing. 2004. It was the night, and The Wizard came out, it says, also in 2004. So they came out pretty close to each other. It is a two-part narrative. It's sort of sometimes weird for folks. They don't see... They usually you have it's either one book or it's a trilogy. This is a two-part thing. I can't remember. I can't remember the fancy word for two-part that goes from the same thing as trilogy to trilogy, etc. The interesting thing to me about it, one of the interesting things to me about it, it's been a while since I've read them, so I need to go back and read them. There is a very specific duology. It could be a duology. There is a... It's going to bother me. I have to look it up now. I think duology sounds right. But a pair of related novels, plays, or movies. You got it. Audi Maynard, you have won the prize. I don't know what the prize is, but there it is. Only you will know what the prize is. It will arrive shortly. But anyway... Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's basically he does half the narrative at first, and then there's a jump, and then he does the other half of the narrative. which takes place sometime later. One of the interesting things here is just the way that he tinkers with a lot of Gene Wolfe's books. And here's the thing, and you find this, there is this sort of deep sort of, there is religion. There are a lot of Christian themes, but they're not overpowering. He actually is. He actually, I believe he was a devout Christian. I am not. I am agnostic. But he actually takes the Christian mythology and he plays with it, and he seeds it very subtly on a very deep level on the things. He does not preach at anyone, which is nice. And then he's also a fan of other mythologies. He's a fan of Norse mythology, which he uses in here, and there's certain Celtic influences as well, because he has this whole little cosmology that he sets up in here, that are kind of part of the whole thing, at the beginning, that says where these different realms that exist. And he writes it from the perspective of this kid who's from our Earth, who gets lost and finds his way to. It's the fantasy portal genre once again, where a kid gets lost, finds himself in this world of knights and fairies. And there's a lot of influence from Arthurian legend as well. He ties so much into... That's the thing, is that when Gene Wolfe is tying mythologies together, he does it really well. But he manages to tie in Arthurian legends. He ties in certain elements of Christian mythology. He ties in certain elements of a lot of heavy elements of Norse mythology. I wouldn't be surprised if there was Kabbalistic stuff in here, but because there's a lot. He knows a lot. He has studied a lot of these different mythologies, and it's very cool to see sort of how it goes, but. It is interesting. It's this kid sort of coming to terms and with himself and growing up. And there is, I will say, there are certain things that happen in these books that I think can be construed as abuse to the character, to the main character. So I do want to provide a warning about that. But he kind of, because he certainly he goes and he deals with these fairies, and they play with him and they do things to him that kind of change him fundamentally in certain ways. Well, they change him in certain ways, but they're ways that he finds positive at the time. So that's the thing. But the thing is, it's not. I want to kind of stress, as far as, and again, it has been a number of years since I read this, but something I do remember is it is not. I do want to stress, it's not sold in the book as a positive change. You can kind of tell that the narration here it's not exactly a reliable narrator entirely, because he's just telling the story from his perspective. And it is, I think, clear that, it's like, okay, these things are being done to you, and now this is how we deal with it, and we figure it out. And then later in the series, the kid has certain points where he's tempted to behave in the same way, and he has to deal with that as well. So there's a lot of deep sort of morality in here as well that gets sort of looked at and examined, which I think. Probably he does a better job of it in these books than he does in the New Sun books, to be perfectly honest. Again, this was written in 2004, so it's better than a lot of than others in this respect. But I mean, he does have certain old man attitudes that do need to be accounted for. For me, they do not ruin the books, but that's just me. They might for everyone else as far as who is not like me. So just grain of salt, but it is really good writing. So I do still, I do recommend checking it out. And this is a good series to start with. Again, like I said, if you want to get into Gene Wolfe, because it is the most accessible. It's written from this kid's perspective. You know, he talks about things that we can grab hold of and understand, in language we can understand. And he goes through this journey where he wants to be a knight. The character changes quite a lot throughout the course of this thing. And in the first book, we learn about these different realms. We start learning about how these different realms work as he's just sort of wandering from thing to thing, and how there's a time differential depending on which realm you're in. You have this situation where these realms, like the realm of the Fae, is like below you, and you can eventually get there if you walk to the right places, and you can kind of see it if you look at it in the right way. And sort of the realm of the and sort of the idea, and I'm simplifying this obviously, but the idea that the realm of the Norse gods is like is above you. And again, you can kind of see it if you look at the right thing. And he's going in pursuit of this cloud. Hey, how's it going? We're talking about Gene Wolfe, and the Knight and the Wizard Knight series. We have this thing where he's trying. So he sees this castle in the clouds and he wants to get there, and so that's kind of what he's chasing. That sort of leads to to basically the portal thing happening, where he goes and he ends up in this realm, and so it is very much one of self-discovery. And the interesting thing is also that this book just sort of ends. The first book just sort of ends at the end of a scene when he's just accomplished something, and we're about to find out, maybe it looks like, what he's finally going to encounter when he gets to a place he wants to go. And the book ends. And book 2 picks up years later in the same realm. But there's a time differential, so it might not actually be years later, like back on Earth. We don't really ever go back to Earth, per se. He sends messages back to Earth to his, I believe his brother, Ben. You never actually find out the kid's real name until the very end of the book, also, by the way. The end of the second book. Because you only just hear what it is that the other people call him. And he becomes, you realize that a lot of the part of this book, The Night, as you're reading The Wizard, is that during the course of the night, he was actually becoming kind of a figure out of Arthurian legend and getting tied into things. And then in the subsequent years, he is much more of an adult. And is leaning more toward actually being a wizard than a knight. Because he's learned so much in a lot of things involving sort of the magics of the realm that he's in and how things work. And you start to wonder now. The interesting mystery in the first book is like, okay, what's this realm about, and how does he figure out what's there, and does he get to what he wants? And the mystery of this book is what's happened, what has happened to him, and what's been going on for the last the last several years. How have things changed? How has he changed other things, and how have other things changed him? And how does he come to terms with all that? That's kind of really what it moves towards. So it's a very neat sort of switch from curiosity about the future to curiosity about the past. that happens. So it's and you do learn a lot, even just from things that he just sort of says randomly. Throwaway lines. You figure out, you're like, you look and it's like, oh crap, this is what that is. And he kind of finally is sort of deals with trying to find some form of enlightenment, some form of heaven per se. And it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. So I know apparently he was writing other stuff. I can't remember when it was that Gene Wolfe passed away. It wasn't too horribly long ago. It was a number of years. But apparently, it was last year. It was about a year ago, actually. We're 2 weeks shy of a year ago that Gene Wolfe passed away. It was only last year. That's how long. That's how long this year and last year have been. Yeah, I March 2020 was several years long. I can't remember anymore. It's been at least 3 forevers since 2019. It's so long. It's been so long. In any case, I think it's very interesting stuff to read, and I do recommend it for anyone who is into various mythologies and Arthurian legend and Norse mythology and what have you. I think it's a cool thing to check out, and it has an interesting system by which it sort of decides where it talks about the values of different souls. There is a certain thing that I personally kind of disagreed with or didn't really like the way that it was set up, that I sort of figured out as I got later into the second book, as far as kind of sort of more that they kind of made happen to sort of serve serve Christian mythology a bit, kind of over everything else. But I mean, again, he doesn't do it in a preaching way. But it was this stuff that I noticed, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I see kind of where you're throwing that in. Where are these? Yeah. And so I kind of feel as though that there's certain, and I mean that's just the way the whole thing with the realms is set up. It's part of the conceit of the whole thing involves the way the realms are set up, and there's a hierarchy. So that kind of was something I was like, okay, I wouldn't do it this way, but still, it's its own enclosed mythological system, so it's not. I don't think he's necessarily. I mean, okay. I don't think he's necessarily heavily commenting on other religions and what have you. I think he is maybe a little bit. I think. Yeah, okay, and this could easily be read to say, he's trashing them, and I don't think he's trashing them. I don't think it's quite as pronounced as one might think, but it is a very interesting analysis of a lot of these things, and he doesn't. The thing is, he doesn't dismiss anything, and that's kind of really. He works with and incorporates other mythologies. He does not dismiss anything in them, as far as I'm aware. At least nothing that he brings up in the books. So I do recommend checking them out. Also, very well written. Very well written. For anyone who might be into that. Now I'm going to drag this table closer so I can grab the other things. How is everyone doing? Is everyone doing all right? Have you been hydrating? That's very important. I have been discovering the wonders. I can't remember if I talked about this Monday or not. I didn't, because I haven't talked to you since this happened. I've been discovering the wonders of ordering groceries and then going and picking them up. And the way that this particular chain of stores does it is you order on the website and you pay. You can pay with a card, and then you go to the store and you park in a little area in front of the store, and then they come out and they will put the thing. You open the trunk, they will put the stuff into your trunk and then close the trunk, and you don't have to touch them or get close to them, and it is delightful. All you have to do at most is roll down the window and press a button when you're there. So I do I do bring gloves. I did bring gloves for that. Because that's a button a number of people have pressed. But that was, I think, very good for me, because shopping in grocery stores for me for the last few weeks, has been, I'm not going to say it's nightmarish. It hasn't been quite that bad. But it's been harrowing. It has been very, I don't want to compare it to like a war zone per se. It's not exactly that. It's just, it's very tense. Very tense. And so it's just one of those things where I've had the last time I went into a grocery store, I grabbed one of the big carts. I didn't really necessarily need a big cart, but I just used it as a barrier between myself and other people. Because there are a lot of folks in there who didn't care, and would come right by you. They would walk right by you, and I'm gonna sort of pause looking for stuff. And so I had taken to do just sort of swinging the cart around when I saw someone coming, so that it would be impossible for them to be closer than the width of the cart, which again, not 6 feet, unfortunately, but still was something. So yeah, it was. This was a much improved thing. Just essentially ordering, and they were nice enough to actually. The person who was doing the shopping called me ahead of time and told me about the items that they couldn't get, and sort of asked, "Okay, do you want something else?" And that we kind of dealt with that. And I think actually, after looking at it, part of their policy is there are certain items they have to call you and ask about before they make substitutions. Which is very good, because that I think they realized that it is less of an expenditure to do that than to have to deal with complaints afterward. So that was a very positive experience for me, for the most part. I then of course had to deal with the situation that. It was a thing I kind of expected, but they brought it out in paper bags, and they put the paper bags in the trunk. There were 2 containers of milk that they did not have in bags. They just put the milk containers in the trunk because, it's got handles. Why do you need bags? And the reason why I generally go for plastic bags with handles is because I live 3 floors up, and I have to climb 3 flights of stairs to get to my apartment door. Also, one of the reasons why when I go shopping, I put things in plastic bags with handles, is because my door requires a free hand to open. I have to have a hand free. The way that it's built, I can't just sort of get up close to it while I'm holding a thing and turn my hand around without dropping the thing. Because of the way that, the door sill is. I have to actually reach the hand and turn the knob. The whole hand has to be free. And able to move independently of it. I was going to say independently of its fellows. It has only one fellow. So I had with the so I had 5 paper bags and 2 milk containers, which I can only carry with one hand. It's got a handle, but that's yeah. That takes it up. So that was 7 trips up 3 flights of stairs when I got it in on Monday. And so I feel as though so after that I didn't they say that it's like if you can, and if you don't need your groceries immediately, you can just sort of set them aside, and then 3 days later they'll be okay. So after making that trip 7 times, I was like, nope, I don't want to look at these groceries for another 3 days. So I put them there. And tomorrow at 2:30. Tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. will be grocery time. I will finally be able to go and open the groceries. Because, and actually, in all honesty, some of them I could probably still do now, because I think I have to look and see which things have plastic on them. But I mean, I think some things might have not been contacted by plastic. We'll see. But it's yeah. But gotta wait 3 days for 72 hours for plastic and metal, 24 hours for cardboard. But anyway. At least that's what I last saw. There may be more recent information. That was as of March 24th. But anyway, I was saying I started getting groceries delivered a while ago, so I could just do housework and not go out on my days off. Yeah, that's. I mean, it's a neat thing. I sometimes worry about. Yeah, it's very good that you established that habit before the apocalypse started. So that's very helpful. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I've considered trying the delivery thing. I have not been able to. I've not yet been able to find the. I feel as though. I mean, while that would help me with the stairs, if I had them just deliver them, I worry about them being left out there in front of the door a little bit. Because, I mean, it's either that or I have to open the door for somebody, which I don't want to do. Delivery is very hit and miss, depending on how it goes. I had another delivery made. Lots of deliveries are happening. I was thinking that I would be able to save a certain amount of money by not going out. But that's still being eaten up in delivery fees. But last night I had a delivery that they had done really well the time before, but this time the person didn't call. They just rang the doorbell, and I'm like, oh, great. So I just cracked the door, and so I looked, and they were standing back, which was nice. I looked through the peephole, and then I cracked the door open. And I was like, hi. They said on the phone when I talked to them earlier that you would call me, that you would call ahead, that you would call me when you got here, and that you would leave the food on the doorstep, and they said okay. I'm like, great, thank you. Yes, are we going to go back in time now? Okay, so please leave it on the doorstep, and this is the amount of the tip. Thank you. And it was a little less than I was going to give. So I closed the door. Not hugely less. I know that they need to. I really appreciate what they're doing, but at the same time, I do not wish to be in danger. So, but you know, just like, yeah, okay, and I closed the door, and then I waited, and they left, and then I opened the door, picked it up. Yeah, so but it's at least the delivery of them. I kind of worry that I might try it at some point. I'm just a little worried about the sending, and also reservations for that are seem to be even more difficult to get than reservations for me to go and pick them up. And I get more control when I go and pick them up over sort of where things are placed and where I can. That kind of helps. It helps me psychologically, at least. I rarely open the door for people anyway because it's usually contractors canvassing the neighborhood or the neighbor's children playing ding dong. Yeah. Yeah. The mostly around here it's Mormons. They will show up from time to time just randomly at the door. Mormons and people from the people from a from the cable company wanting to sell me services I already have. That's typically what it's been for me. There are kids around, but normally I just sort of hear them outside. Apparently trying to chasing each other with knives or something. I don't know what they do. What those wacky kids do these days. No, they don't do that. Don't let your kids have knives. Whatever they're doing, it's very loud. Not right now, but I'm just remembering back to the last time I heard them. It was. Haven't heard them recently, but that's a good thing because that means they're hopefully inside safe. So the game books that I have brought today to talk about a little bit. I actually don't think I'm gonna. I think I'm only gonna talk about part of this because it's like it can be like turning on a fire hose when we start talking about this particular game. So I'm gonna start with just a sliver. We'll see how long that sliver goes. I might add a second sliver to it, but we'll just sort of see where this goes. And I think you will all understand, or perhaps not all, but I think an understanding will dawn when I show you what book this is, as to the complexity of what I must talk about. Are you ready? So this is the live-action version of the new World of Darkness book. They're now calling it Chronicles of Darkness. That came out. When did this come out? This came out in the past. I'm sure there are copyright numbers in here somewhere. It's a pretty cover, is it not? 2005. 2005 also is kind of the year that my life fell apart for a while, and things had to be rearranged very severely. I have a history with the various White Wolf games, and so I know that, especially now, it is always tricky to talk about White Wolf games. I mean, it's always been, let's be fair, it's always been tricky talking about White Wolf games. But now more than ever, it is. So I'm going to specify, this is all stuff prior to the, were they Norwegian? I can't remember. Can't remember if it was Norway or if it was, we'll say the Vikings. This is all prior to the Vikings getting involved. The various Viking edgelord folk that got involved in the ownership and publication of various White Wolf products. There may actually be more than one group of Vikings now that I'm thinking about it. They're not actual Vikings. We're using Vikings as a metaphor here. Because that was actually the metaphor White Wolf used a while back. But, you know, Vikings also known for raiding and pillaging and doing terrible things. And as it turned out, these folks later did as well. I'm not going to talk about that right now. We all know that stuff, I'm sure. That was on the internet quite a lot. The interesting thing first thing I wanted to mention, though, as part of my strange history, is that I am in this book. Looking silly. It's late in the book. I talk about the section on narrators. That is myself and my friend Ed playing at a game. We knew we were being photographed. We knew the person was going to come around and take pictures. So we were like, okay, let's do something. We need something for skills. Okay, yeah, let's just do the thing where I'm looking at your sheet and going crazy. You can also notice this was back at the time when I still thought digital watches were a pretty neat idea. I used to live in Atlanta. I actually... Part of my moving to Atlanta originally had to do I'm from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I lived in a few different places growing up, but then I went back to Myrtle Beach to kind of go to college, which was a terrible mistake, probably. But I missed home, basically, a place that I considered home. Afterwards, I was like, okay, I've got to get out and go to other places, get on the main film or theater circuit. I don't want to jump right to New York or LA, though. That'd be too much. I need to build up and see if I can get in through the side door. Would have been better if I'd just gone straight to New York or LA, probably. So I thought, but I was thinking, oh, no, so we'll go to Atlanta. Atlanta's like on the circuit, but it's not right, so I can get in and then, and then get experience there and then maybe go to one of those cities. That was the plan at the time. So that's why I was in Atlanta. So I had already gotten involved on a local level back in Myrtle Beach with what I affectionately refer to as the Running Around Pretending to be Vampires Club. At the time, they were called the Camarilla. Some folks still call them that. Right now, technically, their name now is the Mind's Eye Society, I believe. And they have a global LARP. The folks at the time, in the late 90s and early aughts, in Atlanta, there was a certain amount, because that's where White Wolf was at the time, the folks from White Wolf would participate in that LARP as well. And there were a number of weird legal things that happened. Some hysterical... White Wolf got into some hysterical legal battles in the 90s and early aughts that I won't get into right now, but they are kind of fun to talk about. So maybe at some point when I have time to look it up, I'll go into detail about it. I think I did on my personal podcast when I went into a... I have a thing I wanted to... I did a podcast on my it's on my website, jimyesthatjim.com, if you want to go there and listen to me rant for like 45 minutes about various White Wolf things. I think I talk about the legal battles in there some. But anyway. So I got into it in the late 90s and then moved to Atlanta. And was participating in games with people who It was mostly just other fans, but then I also did participate a little bit with some of the actual White Wolf staff at the time, and because I was also thinking maybe I'll write for RPGs, and so I was like, okay, maybe if I can get them. At the time, my thinking was, if I can get some of these people into a game of Amber and get them addicted to that, then perhaps I can, That never happened. Then they'll let me write their products. I didn't know how things worked at the time. And so the thing was that when we... So we were playing, I think it was Vampire. I can't remember what it was anymore. I think it was a Vampire Night. We were there, and they were going to come around. Yeah, yes, Games of Amber are good for you too if they're done well. But the also addictive as hell for some folks sometimes. I'll talk about the Amber campaign I ran later. I've actually run more than one now. That's something I can talk about later also. But yeah, so the thing with one of the things with just sort of Mind's Eye Theater stuff, we were 100% of your daily RDA of treachery. Excellent. Now we so we played. So the interest there were significant differences playing in Atlanta from playing at the beach, because the beach largely were composed of my friends, people that I had kind of roped into it, and then their friends. The various games that we would play. I was a big fan of Changeling more than anything else. But I liked Vampire. I liked Mage. I liked pretty much all the games they had. When this came out, it was like the new Vampire was coming, and that was it. But the thing that I think about the New World of Darkness that I found interesting just reading the core book, which at the time I also had the tabletop version of, which I never actually played, almost never actually played any of their New World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, in just tabletop. It was usually LARP. There are two exceptions to that happened here in Charlotte, but I will not get into those right now. Maybe I will get into those later. But yeah, so playing in Atlanta was very different because there were much more about the politics. I had played in Charleston, where there were also much more about the politics, and especially in the vampire game. So it's like, okay, you got to watch yourself. There was this big kind of shift from the ideas of sort of the Anne Rice-driven sort of I don't want to be a vampire, but I do want to be a vampire, and I will try to struggle with this and talk to my psychiatrist about drinking blood. Versus, which actually is not entirely an accurate representation of Anne Rice, but that it was influenced by that and a number of other things, and there was a transition from that to sort of more of a we are dark superheroes type thing. I'm just gonna say it. Basically, we are all loner. We are all Wolverine. Basically, we are all loners. No, that's Werewolf Jim. Yes, I know, but really, it's all of them. There was a room full of loners with superpowers. And I didn't have any problem with playing that way, actually. Where it's like, yeah, we're all just, badasses trying to, looking at our individual thing, and then they tried to get political, which was somewhat successful, except that to a certain extent. The thing is, the way that a lot of things in that club were set up, well, I mean, as with anything, it depends on who you play with. But when you get to a place as big as Atlanta, and you had a lot of people in there, into the mix. A lot of them you don't know. It's very much, or you don't know well, it is very much a thing of, like, starting to form cliques, and very much a thing of, certain things where you like, they're, like, really kind of, they're really, they say that they're not, they're deeply in character and trying to just do everything for their character. And some people are, but then some people are really just more trying to gain advantage, thinking in ways that they would out of character to figure out how to gain advantages for their characters, which is mostly, I think, which is what you would see a lot of. And I mean, a lot of, they're like perfectly okay people if you get them, individually outside of the game and you talk to them like human beings. But just with a lot of them, it's sort of the way that the club kind of structured the game. It was very much it was all encouraged toward just funneling toward, the game never ended, because it was a constant ongoing thing. It was all very much funneling toward just wanting to get as high as you can in the organization, get as high as you can in the game, get more powerful characters, etc., etc. So we were hoping when the New World of Darkness came out that this was an opportunity not only to level the playing field, but to when we were starting doing a chronicle in the New World of Darkness, we were thinking, okay, well, this is now an opportunity for everyone to start out on the same level, and to make new friends finally, and actually play this game differently. And it was very interesting reading the vampire book, because it was very much a thing. Well, okay, here we go. It was very interesting reading the vampire book, because this is Requiem, obviously. Because it was very much keyed to the whole here, random pages. It was very much keyed toward not having a meta plot that you had to deal with. Sort of a plot that the publishers have going on in the background. It was very much keyed toward doing your own thing, building your own structure in your own city, and not. You can have it so that no two cities look alike in the way that their vampiric hierarchy is set up. So that was and so that was the thing that that lasted for a little while, as far as just sort of our approach, the sort of friendlier approach to everything in that way, out of character friendlier approach to things. But then you had inevitably the sniping started up again, and and power mongering and what have you, and it just kind of for me got to the I did not like that aspect of it. I kept playing. Because there was enough for me to like. Then when I ended up moving to Charlotte, we started it. There were a couple of attempts to start it up here, or to revivify whatever chapter was out here. It eventually worked, and it was kind of I had a better, friendlier experience here than sort of overall, I think, but. Really, I kind of was not as much into Vampire. I kind of got more into Mage. This was Mage the Awakening, the Mind's Eye Theater version of that. where I got to I liked the, you know, because again you're less encouraged to be an asshole, basically. And to be perfectly frank, Requiem, you're encouraged to be an asshole if you're not careful, and that's sort of the path of least resistance for a lot of folks playing that. And that kind of bleed, and there's bleed that's involved with that as well. Mage the Awakening, you're sort of, you're trying to... It's still equally possible to be an asshole, but it's not, I think, as encouraged by the structure of the game. I ran Mage the Awakening for a little while there. I was the storyteller for like 6 months, something like that. Didn't have time to piece together things that I wanted to do because of real life concerns, and I eventually got to the point I was like, okay, you know what? I committed to run this, and I'm just going to conclude these couple of plots, but then I've got to do other stuff with my life. Because by that point, it was 2011, I was like, I've got to freaking do things. So I did. Certain aspects, I think there's some aspects folks love about the Chronicles of Darkness and some that they do not. Things that I think are interesting about just even the core game is that they start to talk about supernatural as having almost a Cthulhu effect on people, and that they on mortals, and that the mortals are like they have trouble comprehending it, and there are like roles involved. Not sanity per se, it's not quite as gripping as that, but certain palpable fear of the supernatural comes into play for mortals, and that was interesting and rarely gets explored in games, I think, because people are playing the other, the various templates of supernatural creatures. I got very much, I will say, with Vampire, I was very amused by the character, the concept of the character I played. I was playing a character in the Ordo Dracul, who was someone who used to be a hematologist. Used to be an absolutely horrible person in life because he sort of was involved with the Third Reich. But became a better person after becoming a vampire. He was... Eventually his arc was, I think he was going to... I fully believe if we had played out an arc for him, I wanted him to go down. I wanted him to... Because he was not, he still needed to pay for his sins. Which he had not fully paid for. But that never actually came to fruition. And this was dark crap that we were exploring, and it was not like I'm sitting there wanting to, it was like we need to. I kind of wanted to see, and especially in the vampire setting, you're sort of encouraged to like, okay, we want to explore kind of what these sort of interactions are like. And the odd thing about it is that my intention was not to play him for very long and have him ended up going down, but it became this weird thing, whereas he was the only one who actually, by and large, in a lot of groups, tackled the plot, any plot that would show up. So this was where I started getting, with that character, Dr. Von Mueller, it was basically, I started to get this sort of thing for being the character that the players who all wanted to just do politics with each other would point at the plot to deal with the plot so they could get on with what they wanted to do. And so I would go deal with the plot. He was very, actually, the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was actually much more of a Call of Cthulhu character than a character for Vampire. It was a strange thing. There were a lot of moral things, questions of morality that we never really got to play with again because of the way that a lot of folks play the game. We never really dug into, and I kind of was wanting to explore those things and sort of figure out just like, and again, this was not, disclaimer once again, because this is the internet. No, I was not using it as a way to explore doing bad things. This character didn't do bad things. This character was trying to find redemption for having done bad things. And by being as good to the people around him as he could. And the idea, my idea was that it was never going to be enough. And I was just curious about the sort of the kind of, I mean, because let's face it, if you're playing a vampire, you're not, it's very hard to play a vampire who is a good person. And because of just sort of the way that vampires work. I mean, they prey on people. That's sort of their definition. So if you're doing something where you want to explore themes like that, and you have consent to do so and all that, you actually are going to want to. You're actually going to want to try and do the exploration. And unfortunately, the groups they ended up not really being as interested in exploring those, because there's this whole freaking LARP going on, and you have people going in a million directions. It was very fun playing him. I have to say, after a while, because it was just this thing where he became it's like, we need someone to be an expert on something. Okay, here we go. Let's see what this occult thing is we're trying to figure out today. And so that led to a lot of fun moments. But eventually, time was getting to the point. It's like, okay, I gotta pare down what I'm doing and work on other things, in life. So I stopped playing in the vampire game, and I was running Mage for a little while. Mage I had a lot of fun with playing, in that also, you get to play people who are better people just to start out with. But the thing with when I started playing Mage the Awakening, I was playing a character that was sort of I had this idea of a debonair ex-thief, but the problem was, after a while, I was like, he's an antique dealer at this point, who uses luck magic still from time to time, and from time to time continues to use his skills at cat burglary, and it was fun playing him somewhat, but then I kind of was very dissatisfied, because after a while I realized he'd already done everything in life that he needed to do. So I have to be careful if you're playing a retired anything. You have to find what the interesting thing for the drama is. So I retired him, and then I played someone who was much more... I played someone who was much more into... who was kind of running from his identity. He had dealt with religious organizations that he was running from, and had put up this whole new identity. Had changed his name and become a radio become a radio show host. Was basically an evangelical super pagan, basically. And it was very much evangelizing things, but using a sort of an odd kind of semi-Christian structure for it, which was it's like, use their tools to do this to promote this other thing, basically. It was a strange and interesting time, and he had plans, and he had ambitions, and it was fun to play him too. And it did not become dissatisfying in the way that playing the original character had. But there was a lot more sort of plotting and planning and stuff that I had to kind of work out. But it was a decent amount of fun. But again, like I said, I had to. There was a point where I basically stopped playing him when I started running the game, for the most part. I think he'd show up from time to time. And I ran for like 6 months. I was going to do a year, but I did 6 months, finished up the plots, and then I took off. Because that was, I started learning. I tried to, I was trying to go to broadcasting school, because at that point it was like, I need time to focus on this. And trying to figure out things that I really want to do in life. Or at least things I really want to do in life that that can be accomplished, which is what my grandmother meant when she kept calling me and saying, "No, what do you really want to do?" I was like, I want to be a writer. No, what do you really want to do? Ah, I see. That answer is not acceptable. Can I go into television? Is that more acceptable? Yes. Oh, good. Going into radio and TV, and I learned a lot about radio and TV at that school, but unfortunately, then realized I was doing it in Charlotte, and here you have to wait for someone to die before you can get a good job. By and large. So these things happen. But, interestingly enough, I was able to use the training that I got there to do somewhat to do this. So that's a bonus. That's a plus. I seem to have wandered a bit. Really? Why, yes! But, yeah, there are so many more things that I could talk about with respect to, White Wolf, the World of Darkness, etc., but we're going to save that for later. In the meantime, he says, as he's trying to avoid a leg cramp, I think perhaps, as we drift into the second part of this, we're going to try doing a little bit of gamery. We've been doing this for an hour, that's good. I hope everyone here has been doing all right. What we're going to do, I think... See, I think I farmed a little bit on Monday. I did Stardew Valley. I think what we're going to do today, as I transition over, I'm going to need to step up and I'm going to need to stand up and walk around for a minute so that my leg doesn't cramp up on me. So I think what I'm going to do is, so I'm going to go to a break card in a little bit, and I'm going to go. I have recently picked up the bonus content. It's not bonus content. It's not free. I have picked up the DLC for We Happy Few. And so there are 3 stories that they tell afterward, and I want to start looking into those. And I think this is a good time to do that. So let's see. We are encroaching on noon. I just want to see. Let's see. How much time do I have before I will start needing to do lunch? Probably not terribly long. We will play the game for a little while, I think. I don't really have anything else to talk about, I think. Do you do song requests? G. I do not, I'm afraid. I have yet to figure out how that works. I don't really get into any of the any of the various singing apps on this. It's just not my thing. I'm not terribly good at it. I do sometimes watch when other folks do it, and it's kind of cool. No, I'm gonna probably in just a wee bit. I think, yeah, I can do it for like a little while. I'm going to look into some of this. We're going to start up some of this content for the bonus content for We Happy Few. So we're going to dive into that shortly. I very much appreciate folks hanging out. And so I'm going to go to the break card, and then things will suddenly jump over to that other thing in just a moment. But for those of you coming for just the chat, thank you for being here and chatting. I very much appreciate it. I hope that all is well. Please maintain. I'll be back in a bit.